All right. Well, appreciate everybody coming out. I know it's been a long conference, and I think we're on the last day here tonight in Vegas. So the fact that we're up before noon is pretty impressive. This is a very interesting panel, and this is one I've been kind of looking forward to all week. This is the first time I believe we have the two lawmakers who proposed the Strategic Reserve Bill on the same panel. And my goal is to talk as little as possible. The purpose of today is to talk a little bit about the challenges leading up to the bill. Also on stage, two policy writers. So what you'll find is how are these underlying bills proposed, how they created, and ultimately how we are today. So without further ado, my name is Nathan Stomp. I'm a director here at BitGo, and I'll hand it off to Representative Weninger to kick us off.
Hello, there we go. Yeah, just to introduce myself, Jeff Weninger. I'm state representative in Arizona. I was there for 8 years, from 15 to like 22, and then was just reelected now. Been running crypto bills since 2017. I've had 5 or 6 different cryptocurrency-related bills signed into law in addition to this one this year.
Awesome. Adam.
Hey, my name's Adam Schwend. I'm the Director of Public Policy with the State Financial Officers Foundation. We're an association, 501c3, of free market-oriented state treasurers and auditors. Our folks are very interested in this topic. We have folks all over the map, and it's always my goal just to make sure that they have the best information possible. It's not my name that goes on the ballot. It's theirs, so they get to make those decisions, but our organization is definitely interested in a good policy around crypto, making sure that it's an option for those folks who want to take advantage of it.
Thanks. Dennis Porter, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Satoshi Action Fund. We're a Bitcoin advocacy group. Our goal is to go out there and educate lawmakers and regulators on the benefits of the technology, but then we also turn around and we craft model policies, some of which are used as the basis of bills across the country. So far, we've had 9 bills that we've helped get across the finish line. 8 of those bills have been based off of our models, and so we're going to continue to lean in and educate lawmakers, make sure they understand the true benefits of Bitcoin, and also have those models continuously ready so folks can be able to make those introductions and get them introduced, and hopefully we can work with them hand in hand to get them passed into law.
Hi, everyone. My name is Keith Ammon. I come from New Hampshire, the live free or die state. So I've been an early Bitcoin enthusiast. I have a software development background. I'm in my 5th term in the state house. I've been the crazy pro-Bitcoin, pro-blockchain legislator in New Hampshire, and it's kind of fun to see it become mainstream. And we've gotten several bills passed over the years. Most recently, the first Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Bill, and based on Satoshi Action Fund's model. So we appreciate the support from Satoshi Action Fund.
Let's talk a little bit about that. You passed most bill. Was there a little competition between the two? Was who's going to go first? Let's just get this out of the way. Let's...
Yeah, so Dennis was tweeting about all the states ready to go, and we were staying quiet because we were like, I think we can beat everyone else. And so thank you, Dennis, for the... it was a mad dash behind the scenes. It's kind of a funny to experience like what goes on behind closed doors, but we were able to pull it off, and our governor signed it, and it was fun to go first.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about behind the scenes, right? Walk us through a little bit about what that process was like behind the scenes. Jeff, let's start with you. What were some of the challenges that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get out of the way that ours are different models. Keith and them did the traditional model, which I support. I co-sponsored a bill by Wendy Rogers, which had that model, and that bill, and I helped get it to the governor, that bill did get vetoed. So my model was a little different way of backing into a reserve that will hold native Bitcoin, whereas we fix something with unclaimed property. Unclaimed property all over the nation is turned over to the government. But what's happening, I think, in most or all states, is it's being forced to be liquidated by the exchanges and then send in normal fiat. So we changed that to where they're going to send it in its native form, and then the state is going to custody that native form. So if you had Bitcoin from 2.5 years ago, one Bitcoin, when it was $16,000 or $17,000, and then you go claim it, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go claim my Bitcoin. You'd get there today, and there'd be $17,000 because it's been converted fiat. Now with our bill, it will be sitting in its native form worth over $100,000. So I knew that was going to be the better model with me being a Republican legislature, and a Democrat governor, of being able to say, back into it and say, they're friendly to crypto. I just didn't think that they were going to sign the traditional one. So that's kind of was my thinking going into it.
Did you feel, real quick, that having a Democratic governor was a hurdle? There's a lot of talk about Republican versus Democrats in this, I guess, during this conference. So
A little bit, but I mean, I'm probably not liked by the administration, but I'm liked the most of all the Republicans because I'm more affable. I don't just blow people up, blow them up. But there is, I mean, people are starting to take notice. I mean, I'll point out real quick. I've said I've passed numerous crypto-related bills over the years. Those bills were used as judgment in the last election when a ton of money was put into national races on whether or not you were friendly to crypto. There was Amish Shah, who's a friend but a Democrat, voted against my bills. He was, on that basis, voted not friendly to crypto. There's a guy running in southern Arizona right now, a Democrat, and it'll be a Democrat race, Daniel Hernandez, who voted for all my bills, and I think he'll be deemed friendly to crypto because of that. So both sides are noticing it, for sure.
yeah, makes sense. Dennis, were you going to say something?
Well, I just thought it was really interesting that you asked the question around the Democrat governor right immediately after. That was the point I wanted to bring up. Of course, Representative Ammon being able to pass it for the first time, extremely historical. I also just love that Bretton Woods happened in New Hampshire, and we have the first. So the Federal Reserve started in New Hampshire, and we also have the first strategic Bitcoin reserve. So huge historical parallels. But politically speaking, getting it passed by a Democrat governor is huge, because then we can go around the country and we can say this is a bipartisan movement, and that both Republicans and Democrats are signing this legislation into law. And I do agree that it doesn't make it that much tougher, but there's plenty of Republican governors who probably would veto this type of legislation as well. But optically, it was a very big deal for the movement.
And I really think, Representative Weninger, passing your bill really opened up some discussions around this by people who I wouldn't really consider crypto champions, but more crypto curious, but would not feel comfortable spending money from the general fund buying Bitcoin. But this being a more budget neutral option, I think you're going to get a lot more people who are more open to looking at this, because it's not a quote unquote risk, right? It's an opportunity to get the state engaged in this as a possibility without any real risk. And at that point, maybe they're going to actually be looking at the New Hampshire bill going forward, when they see, well, this is actually playing out really, really well. And they wouldn't have gotten in otherwise.
That's a great point by Adam, actually. In fact, we've informed Representative Weninger that we will planning to make his budget neutral version of this a model policy at Satoshi Action that will pass in other states. Yeah,
we've gotten a number of phone calls from treasurers around the country who have noticed Rep. Weninger's bill and who want to talk to us about it. Is this an option for them? And it's not people that I would normally expect to get a phone call from, to be perfectly honest.
Why don't you just describe a little bit the differences with New Hampshire versus what we just talked about, and was it helpful having a Republican in as the governor?
Yeah, just so New Hampshire's a purple state. Currently, the entire state legislature, including the governor, is all Republican. And for some reason, our federal delegation is all Democrat. So it's kind of a weird, I don't know why. I say we elect Democrats so they can get the free stuff from D.C. and bring it back home. So I think that's why. But our treasurer in statute had a list of approved investments that were all super conservative. And in this era of inflation, the risk is that, it's a melting ice cube, any of these, it's a very limited list of investments. So by adding digital assets above a certain market capitalization, in this case it was 500 billion, and then we also have a big gold bug contingency in New Hampshire. So when I looked at the models that Satoshi Action Fund had. The precious metal component I thought would bring in additional support. And I think that turned out to be true. But so precious metals, digital assets as inflationary hedges in a multi-bucket portfolio, I think makes a lot of sense and actually eliminates some of the inflation risk if you constantly rebalance that. Now, in our case, the operating fund, that's not a component or a good candidate for this application. But New Hampshire it's a kind of a hidden secret in New Hampshire. We're very trust friendly. We have a lot of money parked in trusts in New Hampshire. And the state manages several of these trusts, I think around 30 of these long-term trusts that are limited to that bucket of investment. So by adding this as a component to those trusts, it could help those trusts beat inflation over the long term. So that's kind of like the strategy and thought we had in New Hampshire.
Did you get a lot of questions around, you made the comment around other precious metals, like looking at this from a commodity perspective versus cryptocurrency, currency, store value? Like, were there a lot of conversations with other lawmakers around that? Like, what is this?
Yeah, so I've been talking about Bitcoin in New Hampshire legislature since 2015, like from the well, like this is going to be a big deal, and people over the years have initially kind of thought I was losing my marbles, but as it's become more and more mainstream, they remember those conversations, and so there's a little bit of long-term credibility, and so that was sort of like the background for getting these bills across the finish line.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, we're all human, right? So although we can all look at this from the outside, I know we were watching it closely as a firm, very excited to champion this through, but being two people who are orange-pilled for quite some time, was it a little bit of a personal, just excitement around being able to achieve what you did?
Yeah, I would say so. Somebody told me about a T-shirt that they saw somebody wearing that said, "I told you so," or something, and it kind of goes along with that. But I've been successful passing these bills for a long time, whether it's I think we were the first state in the nation to pass a bill that allowed you to mine Bitcoin by law, that government couldn't tell you couldn't mine in your own home, or the fact that airdrops aren't taxed. So sometimes outside of Bitcoin, I know this is a Bitcoin conference, I've passed bills like that. But yeah, it's somewhat vindication, but I'm sure Keith has this too. There gets to be a level of trust. I mean, I deal in good faith with people. I don't lie to them. And so there's that trust on the topic with them. And I think, like was said earlier, it's an educational process. Sometimes even if you're having a bill that doesn't move the needle a long ways, it's another opportunity that I'm educating all the legislators, all the lobbyists, everybody, the citizens that are watching on these subjects. And so it helps further along the process that way as well.
Yeah. Adam, you work with a lot of lawmakers, or more the administrators of the strategic reserves. We were in Orlando, a month or so ago, Dennis as well. Talk us through some of the other states that have not got to this point, and what are the questions that you're receiving as a policy writer?
Well, I think for the longest time, folks, our treasurers, and really I think most people, fell into kind of two camps in you're either a crypto champion, you like the representatives here, they were in this from the beginning, and they were cheerleaders for it, or they're crypto skeptics, and when they spoke of it, it was either as a joke or it was in derision, right? And I think we're seeing a growing amongst folks in fund administration, particularly electeds, a growing middle area of crypto questioners. That they're willing to have these conversations, but they just don't understand it. And when they ask folks about it, they may talk to their friends who they know are very, very big into crypto, and the whiteboard beautiful minds thing comes out and they want to explain how it all works, and they don't understand it. And so if they don't understand it, treasurers and auditors are by nature a conservative group of people. And I don't mean that politically per se, and I think it's a good thing. I want the people who are managing my public money to have a conservative bent, to make sure that they're checking things out before they do things. So I think we have folks who are actually asking the questions of what is this? They see that it's a thing, they see that it's not fake, but they want to know that it's not going to come crashing down, that it's not all smoke and mirrors. And when they actually have these conversations with the representatives, for example, or the folks from Satoshi and the other policy folks, they're meeting them where they're at. They're asking, they're educating them on the basic questions of what this is. Comparing it to gold is a huge thing because it actually is finite, and they can wrap their minds around it. But the difficulty that we've had with a lot of our state treasurers, they just don't understand what it is and can't wrap their minds around it. But I think it's changing now. The fact that we are having these conversations, that there's a larger crypto questioning group amongst state treasurers, that wasn't the case 5 years ago. I think the vast majority of the people were laughing about it in this space, and that's just not happening now. They still have it. You still have folks who said this is all going to come crashing down and you're all going to be broke soon. But that group is much smaller because that middle group is growing because they see this. They see this as a thing. They see people who have made just a remarkable amount of money, and they know it's not going to come crashing down, but they just can't wrap their heads around what it is.
Dennis, your organization has been in a lot of state capitals in the last couple months. Walk us through what that's been like.
It's a lot like what Adam is talking about. You know, when we first started in June of 2022, it was in the middle of the SBF collapse, the middle of the FTX debacle. So lawmakers were, of course, very skeptical, extremely skeptical. I mean, it was hard to even get meetings with lawmakers to talk about anything to do with crypto whatsoever. Bitcoin didn't matter. Fortunately, we were able to engage with some really awesome lawmakers. Actually, Representative Keith Ammon was one of them. Fortunately, we have some long-term believers in this space that were willing to take those types of meetings. In fact, Representative Keith Ammon was the very first lawmaker ever to use a Satoshi Action model way back in the day. So he deserves a lot of praise for his dedication to the space and continuing to fight to make his state a leader. But from 2022 to where we are now is incredibly different. I mean, we had 7 bill introductions in the 2023 legislative cycle because, of course, you know, we started in 2022, so our first legislative cycle is 2023. For those that don't know, states are part-time. Almost every state has a part-time legislature, and almost all of them start in like January or February. So we hit the ground running, 2023, 7 bills based off of our model policy. Now, I mean, like, we can't even keep track. Like, it's like, there's like 30, 40 maybe, who knows really, because lawmakers are so much more interested in this type of policy area. And because we started in 2022 and no one has really been doing what we've been doing, and a lot of credit to our policy director, Eric Peterson, who's here in the, round of applause for Eric, by the way. I mean, he typically I have him come up here on these policymaker panels, but Nathan was kind enough to ask me directly, so I was happy to accept. But nobody had been writing models this way and putting these policies together for the states. And so now that we've been doing it for 3 sessions, this will be our 4th session, it's going to be insane. And our big problem now really is like our bandwidth. Like, we can only focus on so many states at a time. So actually, Satoshi Action is going to be going through a very significant strategic growth initiative over the next quarter really, where we're going to be raising a bit of money to be able to help us bring on more team members, more staff. Because the big problem is, and I'll close on this, is Representative Weninger, you know, all credit to him, got a lot of that bill across the finish line without the full court press of Satoshi Action, right? Like, typically we show up, we testify, we write letters. I mean, we did write letters, but we do a whole lot of work to help make sure these bills become a reality. And there were times when we couldn't show up to testify in Arizona, and we want to be able to show up every single time to testify, every single moment, to make sure that we don't let one little opportunity slip away. So certainly if you're interested in helping us achieve that, we'd love to talk to you afterwards about how we're going to be accomplishing our strategic growth initiative.
And I really have to hand it to Satoshi on this, because right now it is super popular to get involved at the federal level on crypto policy, right? Because we've got an administration who is actually friendly to crypto, especially, you know, after getting beat up for 4 years, you want to engage with what's going on at the federal level. But where the action really is the states. If you want to prevent, I think it was yesterday I heard somebody say that the anti-crypto movement is dead. If you want to drive a stake through its heart to ensure that, get into the states and get half of them to pass pro-crypto legislation. It becomes very difficult for the federal government, a new federal government, to come in that's anti-crypto and change not only federal policy, but in a way that's going to overturn state law. So Satoshi gets into the states and does that, and really, like I said, we're all just so happy to have such a pro-crypto administration, and I'm not saying we shouldn't engage with that, but if we want to do something more permanent, it takes 15 years to get make a ham sandwich in Congress. You can actually get something done in a state in one session, maybe two. And let's take that opportunity now to firm up the pro-crypto agenda in our states so that an anti-crypto administration in the future can't overturn it.
Keith,
Yeah, I'd just like to piggyback on that comment. The farm team for the federal delegation from every state is state lawmakers for the most part. So I wish the industry would kind of take a deeper dive into state politics as like a forward-looking approach to, you want to support the pro-crypto lawmakers in their campaigns and oppose the ones, that are opposing crypto. So by putting state legislation forward, we identify who's for it, who gets on the floor of the Senate and speaks against it. Like I can think of a few people that have just done that recently who might want to get reelected, right? And maybe that's an existing organization like Satoshi Action Fund, or maybe it's a new organization that just plays offense, and just goes after, the anti-crypto state lawmakers who may eventually become federal, congressmen, Congress critters, and senators, right? So I wish the industry sort of like moved the ball a little forward in that direction.
Yeah, we heard Vice President Vance yesterday say how we really need the crypto community needs to step up politically, and I think he was talking about how they did for President Trump. But just as Representative said, we need to do that at the state level because those representatives become members of Congress, and those members of Congress become senators and governors, and that's where it starts. If you want to push your movement, look to the states. Look to the states. Look to your cities. Who are you supporting for mayor? Who are you supporting for city council? Because those folks end up moving up too. And if we're going to be able to push this pro-crypto policy forward, it's not just in the states, but it's also in your city level, your city funds, your city pensions. Are they able to invest in it?
There's a lot of future Elizabeth Warrens sitting in state legislatures right now, and you need to find out who those people are and, maybe put a little opposition in their way.
The bar is open, friends.
Jeff, it's been interesting to watch how, the number of states that have voted one or have gotten through some part of the legislative process, but then got, voted down, right? You had multiple bills that kind of looked at the strategic reserves in a different way. One passed, one I believe did not. What was that like? What was the differences, and why did one achieve and one did not?
So, yeah, we had, I think, 4 different bills dealing with the reserve. 2 are mine, and 2 were very similar to Keith's. One by Wendy Rogers, one by Mark Fincham. They both made it to the governor both vetoed them both. I have one bill left, and this makes people a little antsy sometimes, but it deals with forfeiture. It's criminal forfeiture. We did radical changes a few years ago in our law to where you have to be criminally convicted, no more of taking grandma's car because her son had a quarter bag of weed and was driving around like they used to. So it's criminal forfeiture. You're looking at cartels sending money back home and convicted of that. That money, a portion of that money, and this is already being done by Attorney General, and all I'm saying is we're going to take 25% of those funds, keep it in its native form of Bitcoin or convert it to Bitcoin, and it's another funnel going into that same reserve that I have from the first thing. My ultimate idea, I want to get one like Keith's passed as well in the future. But the ultimate idea is to have this other one that is keeping native Bitcoin in its original form and having multiple funnels of money, of Bitcoin going into it that doesn't cost the taxpayers any money. So that one's still alive. It was voted down, but I think I have the votes to get that through. So hopefully we'll get that one added. But I think we'll see more in the future, and I think we'll get a traditional one and essentially have two reserves. One that maybe is going with the investment, the ETF model, and then one where the state is maybe just holding Bitcoin and funds that it wouldn't have had anyway at no cost to taxpayers, that maybe you could just let set and grow and be an investment long term for Arizona.
How did you think about that? Because at BitGo we hold assets for many of the ETF providers as a custodian for the ETF, and then we hold the underlying assets for individuals or entities, corporates, some governments. How did you delineate proposing a spot or holding the underlying? If it's forfeiture and you're just taking the asset and moving it over, I understand. But like investing in the asset in an ETF form versus the underlying.
I just think it's easier with the traditional model that, yeah, you're going to ETFs. I mean, I think most treasurers, if they're going to do that, are going to do it that way. I just think if you already have the asset, or even with the original idea of the unclaimed property, and then you're getting emissions from staking some some USDC or another crypto, that's much easier just to convert that into Bitcoin and transfer it to whoever the custodian is, which there'd be a competitive process for, than turning it into fiat and then buying, the ETF. I just think it kind of made us a little different than keeping it in that native form.
Is it easier, in your opinion, to get a bill through, in either one of your opinions, if it's an ETF structure, because it's the treasurers who are ultimately potentially administering these? It's a structure they understand?
I think it's easier. It's an ETF structure in that form. I think if it's not taxpayer money, if it's revenue that wasn't contemplated before or not brought in, I just don't see it as a problem being in the native form. And I think hopefully the purists like that aspect of it a little more.
Yeah, I think it's important to, as you're taking a look at these, along with partnering asset forfeiture reform along with this can really make treasurers feel a little bit more comfortable with it. They don't generally want to hold these things. They don't want to. They make it. They're very proud of the amount of money they give back to people. So they also don't want to go out, like you said, Representative, and grab grandma's car because the grandson had an ounce of weed in it. It scares them when you start talking about civil asset forfeiture. So if you have civil asset forfeiture in your state, this might be an opportunity to look at getting rid of that and going to criminal asset forfeiture. So actually, I have to have a conviction. They are going to probably feel a lot more comfortable with that. Of course, every treasurer is different. I've got a number of treasurers who just think like I said, the whole thing is smoke and mirrors. But it's an opportunity for them to maybe get on board a little bit more if you are partnering it with something like asset forfeiture reform.
Keith, were you going to say something, or I want to touch on unclaimed property as well.
So, so ETF format, that's one of the options in the bill that we passed. I guess I was just thinking back to, we met with the treasurer. Dennis, you were there with some of your team. I had some people come in, and we had early conversations about this bill that eventually got passed. And just some of the comments from the state treasurer at the time, she mentioned that a lot of her colleagues were talking about digital assets, so I thought that was interesting. We've done civil asset forfeiture reform in New Hampshire years ago. We hate it. We hate charging property with a crime. That's ridiculous. So that's not an issue, and we wouldn't want to, utilize this. But the treasurer did mention that they're seeing digital assets that are abandoned or unclaimed, and that that was part of her, thinking about this space. So just some thoughts that came to mind as you guys were talking.
I want to touch on unclaimed because, to your point, there's a lot of this conversation on giving back, right? And how do you deploy the asset back to the individual users? We did a panel yesterday with a couple OGs in the industry talking in 2011, 2012, 2013, talking about how they bought their first Bitcoin and different exchanges they use. Some of those that are no longer around. Some of them that we help handle the bankruptcy for to deploy the asset back to those claim holders. But to your point on unclaimed property, if I logged into Coinbase in 2014, 2015, 2016, whatever it might be, and I bought an asset and I haven't touched it since, that might go into now we're looking at unclaimed property. And how are you guys approaching that in your respective states? And does that feed into the asset going back to those individuals? And I know you touched on it a little bit through the bill, but
Yeah, just real quick, I mean, that's what my bill was mainly about. I added the other part for the reserve later. But right now, if before the bill, your money from 2014 would have already been liquidated and sitting in your state waiting for you in fiat.
yeah.
So what my bill does is says the Department of Revenue is going to go out for an RFP for a custodian, and when you or Coinbase or Kraken is compelled to send the money, which they are by law after 3 years of no action, no signing in. Now, I made very sure you sign in, yes, that's an action. They send you an email and you respond, that's an action. But after 3 years, they're just liquidating it and sending it to the state. So my bill just basically says you're going to send that, and you're compelled to send that in its native form. So when you go to collect your unclaimed property, you have one Bitcoin sitting there instead of the $17,000 we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I've been getting emails from OKCoin USA. I've been talking to that account in years. I think I bought Miami Coin in 2019 when they decided to launch something that's for fun. But it is important to know, like, if you have an account at some of these platforms, you should probably go access it, even if you're just trying to hodl the asset because of these rules in place. Adam, as you continue to approach SFOF and try to educate these other states alongside Dennis, all those conversations, they seem like they're really coming around they're just now more curious than they were.
Yeah, every treasurer is different. I think this really, even though we've talked more that crypto has become more of a Republican thing and AI is more of a Democrat thing, I don't think that really applies much to state treasurers. I think there are Republicans who are very anti-crypto, and there's Democrats who are very pro-crypto. But I think what we are coming around to is that they're asking questions. And like I said, I don't think 5 years ago they were even interested in asking the questions, but they're recognizing the value. And so that's our goal, is we are not necessarily pro-crypto. I personally am, but our organization isn't pro-crypto or anti-crypto. We're pro getting information to our members to make sure that they are actually informed and can write good policy no matter what the decision that they make regarding crypto or any policy. But the fact that we're actually having these conversations, that they're actually noticing that this could be something of value, our financial officers are fiduciaries. They are charged with making the best financial decisions and managing the state finances to the best of their abilities. The question is it truly a fiduciary, a good fiduciary decision to not inform yourself about crypto? I would say at least it's a bad idea to not inform yourself about crypto. And maybe you do your due diligence, and at the end of the day, you don't think it's right for your state. That's your decision. But I think it is incumbent upon financial officers to know about crypto, to inform themselves about crypto, to make sure they have all the information and make decisions based on that, and not just push it aside because they think it's smoke and mirrors.
The fact that both of you on the stage talks about the collaboration you have in between multiple states, right? Besides that, besides the orange-pilled individuals who are helping push this, do you get a lot of calls from other lawmakers in other states just asking you, just curious, crypto curious is what you'd say, about what are you guys doing? Why were you orange-pilled years ago? How did you get this? Or why? What's the thought process? I mean, do you get other states reaching out to yourselves?
Yeah, so there's a loose network of
There's a secret Telegram group I need to be a part of.
Yeah, there's signal chats, I think.
Okay,
more.
there you go.
But there are, like, we have New Hampshire Blockchain Council in New Hampshire, and other states have their councils or associations, and there's a loose network. And so the people on the ground in, say, South Carolina or Texas, the lawmakers reach out to them, and then that word or questions travel through that network. That's how I experience it, but maybe you have a different experience.
I have had a few people reach out, haven't had time to get back to them yet because I've been so busy. But mainly it's just in-state and then talking to people like Dennis and other people like that. But I'm sure that's coming, and I'm more than open to talking to whoever about it.
Yeah. I think what's important to understand is you guys talked on the farm system, and so we already covered that, but just how important that farm system is to what's happening at the federal level. Ultimately for everybody in this room, like including myself, understanding how we need to reach out to local lawmakers, because ultimately that feeds up. I think, Dennis, you said 50% of state lawmakers, or people on the federal side were at one point state lawmakers. What sort of advice, given that you've now passed a number of laws over the years, what sort of advice do you have the new lawmakers that are coming into the state level and how they approach everything from potentially fundraising to just engaging with maybe not just crypto, but other high-risk asset classes? I lived in Colorado for 7 years. I know marijuana was a big ticket item for a long time. Mushrooms were a big ticket item for a long time. At one point, crypto fell in that bucket, and we saw a choke point, and the banks were kind of bucketing us in this high risk. How do you approach just that advice?
I tell people you just have to educate yourself on the things. I mean, I've been on the floor of the House debating this, and somebody says, I don't understand this, so I'm voting no, literally on camera. And I'm like, well, educate yourself on it. It's not, I don't really understand how a computer works in the back end or a car. I couldn't even build a car. It doesn't mean I'm not going to vote on items. You educate yourself to a point where you can vote on things. And reach out to other people. There is so much opportunity in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, on every aspect. We have a couple very good lobbyists from Arizona here in the back, Brian and Angelica, and I'm telling you, I was talking to him years ago. So he's the most educated lobbyist in Arizona on cryptocurrency. And there's a wide open space in that. I mean, big people are approaching lobbyists, and I've seen some of them who've gotten hired. They have no clue anything about crypto, but they were like considered one of the top lobbyists or something. And you all know this learning curve is not quick. You can't like a lot of lobbyists try to learn something in a weekend. You can't learn this in a weekend. And so there's opportunities at every aspect of it, including for legislators. And with legislators, you trust people on certain subjects. I'm a city guy, so I go to the rural people if there's something about ranching or water or farming, and people come to me if it deals with technology and cryptocurrency. So seek out the people who know these things, who can give you kind of a good advice on them as well.
Yeah. Keith, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, for new lawmakers, you want to build your relationships, and so your currency in the state legislature is your own credibility, keeping your word, being like a good faith actor in the system, and maintaining that over time. And then you also want to specialize. You want to kind of pick your lane of what you're considered an expert in. And so if crypto is your thing, you want to, as Jeff was saying, you want to get educated on it. And it might not take 10,000 hours, but it might take several months and deep reading. You want to have relationships with the regulators inside the government. You want to, and that takes time to build that. Do not go out, get elected first time, and then just go out swinging, because you're probably going to break a bunch of stuff and maybe upset some people who have been working on it for a very long time, right? So pool your resources, find your allies, and build your relationships. That's really what I find works.
Yeah. We have only a couple minutes left, and I wanted to allow Dennis and Adam to talk about a few things that you see on the horizon. We've now got 2 bills. There's a number of other states that we hope to see passed. I know Texas is kind of getting very close. But what do you see the horizon being over the next 12 months? And then ultimately, I'd love to hear from you two on what your individual states, now that you've passed this iconic, law, what's next on the individual state level?
So I'll be quick so we can get back to the lawmakers here, but two big things just for people to be aware of. This year is obviously Texas. It's getting very close. The calendar is about to end, but I think they'll get it across the finish line. And the governor has signaled that he's going to be signing this bill. Obviously, the lieutenant governor has made it a priority bill. North Carolina is also a really good state where the speaker is carrying the bill there, so there's a good shot that we get something done there this year. Ohio is going through the process of getting it done as well. They are just in the beginning, but it's a year-round legislature, so they have a little bit more time. Pennsylvania is also going to be making a second effort. They were originally the first state to ever introduce it, but there's going to be a second push now, and they're also a year-round legislature. The other big thing that I think is really important that I wanted to touch on, because we've talked about it a little bit of time, the farm team. You know, you said the 50% of lawmakers at the state level eventually go, or 50% of lawmakers at the federal level come from the states. One of the big things that we're going to be doing is we have a pledge project. We're going to be making lawmakers at the state level, or asking them, I should say. We don't make them, but we're going to be having lawmakers. We're going to be requesting that they please sign our pledge to show their support for this space. Because there's a lot of like, oh, I tweet about it, or I write this article about it. Like, we want them to pledge that they're going to protect and defend and advance pro-Bitcoin policy. And our goal is by the end of 2026 to have 10% of all state lawmakers in the entire country sign that pledge.
Yeah, and our goal continues to be just education for our members. I think the fact that you have so much activity happening in state legislatures that treasurers and auditors are going to be kind of forced, if they haven't already. And I think most of them have. Like I said, crypto questioners and crypto curious folks are really taking the lead. So we're, as those states those auditors and treasurers are going to force to have these conversations if they haven't already. We want to be able to make sure that we're providing them the information that they need. The last thing, just the very, very next step, I think we should, our state auditors and treasurers should also look to what blockchain technology can do beyond even just cryptocurrency. As there is continue to be interest in kind of quote unquote Doge efforts, rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. That's kind of what our auditors have been doing. They're like the OG Doge folks. Having the possibility of blockchain technology assisting to them in that is I think a huge opportunity that we have not touched on nearly enough. And so I think going forward, not in the next 12 months necessarily, but going forward over the years, using that technology for our auditors to really dive deep and to eliminate that waste, fraud, and abuse is really something I'm excited to look into.
One battle at a time.
Yeah, one battle at a time.
Jeff and then Keith. Individual states, and what do you think that, now that you've passed this, there's obviously others that are in the pipeline, but what's the next 12, 24 months look like in your mind?
Yeah, I think next year, because we're getting ready to end session, we're have the budget coming up here in a couple weeks, and then we'll be done. I think next year, if people have unique ideas, a lot of the ideas come from other people, reach out. We'll look to hopefully get a traditional reserve passed, and I'll be looking for other things, like I said, to add on to our reserve, other unique ideas of how we can garner digital assets through no cost to the taxpayer that feed into that reserve. Yeah. And then also at the city level, I mean, I have a friend, Mark Stewart, who in Chandler, Arizona, who's a councilman, now he's on Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. There's all different kinds of levels, just little things, again, educate people on it. He got Chandler to accept Bitcoin for their water bill. I don't know, I would never part with my Bitcoin to pay my water bill, but again, it's more and more education, and maybe in the future they keep a part of that in Bitcoin and store it and different things. So at all levels, there can be things that again advance this space and at the same time educate the citizenry on this more and more.
Keith?
Yeah, so I've been pushing, as Jeff has as well, pushing legislation year after year. Last term, we got a DAO legal personhood bill established. So I'm working currently with the Secretary of State in standing up this registry that's going to be DAO native. So that's something interesting that New Hampshire's doing. I actually had 3 crypto bills in this term. The Strategic Reserve bill that got signed. There's a study commission bill for stablecoin framework, tokenized real world assets, and then we're going to try to do a blockchain wrapper onto our trust infrastructure in the state. So that'll be a year-long commission. I hope to be appointed to that commission and maybe even chair it. We'll see. So I see 3 pieces of legislation coming out of that commission. That should be signed soon. It passed the Senate and the House. And then I have a third bill. It's based on Satoshi Action Fund's Blockchain Basics Act, and then we added some recommendations from our recent Governor's Commission on Digital Assets. That bill unfortunately got stuck in the Senate. My own state senator was instrumental in blocking it, and so I have a little bit of a grudge that I'm going to be working on over the next few months. It's not dead. It's they call it re-referred. It's held over the summer. So, they claim they're going to be working on it. There was one piece in there that had to do with mining anti-discrimination, and that, for some reason, triggered the environmentalists in the state to come out of the woodwork to oppose the entire bill. Even though I decided to take it out, amend it in the Senate to remove that piece, the narrative got set for that bill, which had like 6 different sections to it. That one piece kind of like got it stuck on hold. So I need to do a lot of education in our state legislature, especially our Senate, especially my personal state senator, on the value of mining. And the long-term view is that mining can incentivize new generation projects, and our state suffers from high electricity costs. So my long-term goal is new generation, potentially small modular reactors. That's a whole other thing that I focus on. Marrying mining with small modular reactors and high performance compute is kind of like the magic formula for new generation 5 or 10 years down the road. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on, that long-term idea.
Well, we're in New York. We're not far away. So if you need our house, get a bus together of all the industry folks in New York and ship them up to New Hampshire.
I want on our State House lawn next year, I want mining rigs all over the State House lawn running and generating, and we have lawmakers come and kind of just, see how they work in person. So
well, I know there's a few miners out there, so we'd love to do that. Everybody, thank you for coming. Let's give a round of applause to the lawmakers.